Okay, hi guys, hope you can hear me. Welcome to your Wednesday geography lesson. This is the first time I'm doing this recording, so please bear with me if we end up going down some wrong avenues and making some mistakes. So I want to start by just giving you a little bit of feedback on the work from last lesson. Overall, it was really good to see so many of you managing to get onto that Seneca website. One thing I really did notice though, when I was looking through your questions, was there was a real correlation, a link between the percentage accuracy and the amount of time people had spent actually doing the quizzes. What I want you to really make sure you do is take your time on the activities, and also if you make mistakes then do it again so that you learn from those mistakes. I know that we're not with you at the moment being able to force you to do that, but it's just really good practice because that's the best way that you're going to learn. Okay, so today's lesson we are going to look at how we can measure development. Now this term we are studying the continent of Africa, and just like we've done for all of the other continents, what we're going to do is do an introduction to the kind of basic geography, just so you orientate yourself, you know where in the world we're talking about. That's what you did last lesson. And then we're focusing in on a geographical issue. For us, that geographical issue is development. Now, for now, don't worry too much about what that term development means. I will explain a lot more about it shortly. What I would like you to do to start with, though, is to do your retrieval practice based on your learning from last lesson. So in the folder, you should have a link to a Google quiz which has two sections. There's part 1 and part 2. I would like you please to do part 1. It's a multiple choice quiz based on the human and physical geography of Africa. Should take you no more than about 5 minutes. So if you pause the video here, and I will see you shortly. Great. Okay, so I hope that you all managed to do that okay. So let's get on with the new exciting learning for today's lesson. So as I said, we are going to be looking at how we can measure development. Now, in order to answer that question, the first thing we need to make sure we've got an understanding of is what this term development actually means. Quite a few key words for you today, so I'm just going to kind of talk you through them and make sure that you fully understand. So our first word is development. Now, when we talk about development in geography, what we're talking about is the process of a country improving or getting richer. So we're going to be talking this during the course of this topic about rich countries and poor countries, what are some of the reasons that some countries are more developed, that means richer than others, and also what some of the impacts of that are. And hopefully we'll get a chance to look at what we can do to try to change the level of development in a country. So when I talk about development, when we say what is development, we're talking about process of improving, how rich or poor a country is, and what are some of those differences between the levels of wealth within a country. Now, very broadly, we can split countries in the world into 3 different types. Starting off with our high-income countries. High-income countries, or HICs, these are countries that have a high standard of living. In other words, rich countries. So we live in the UK in a high-income country. Some other examples of high-income countries would be the USA, so the United States, and also Australia. Most of the European countries are also high-income countries. So when you think about high-income countries, HIC, we're talking about rich countries, although as we'll see, it's a little bit more complicated than just being rich or poor. So that's HICs. Our next word is LICs, or low-income countries. A low-income country is a country with a low standard of living. In other words, a poorer country. So low-income country, a country with a low standard of living in general, a poor country. There are lots of examples of these. Many of the countries, but not all of the countries that we're going to be studying in Africa, are low-income countries. And finally, our third group of countries is what we call newly emerging economies, or you'll see the term NEE written a lot. These NEEs, or newly emerging economies, are countries that used to be LICs but are getting rapidly richer. So they're newly emerging, their economies are emerging from poverty and they're getting richer. So these are countries that you might say are in between HICs and LICs. So two really good examples of these countries are China. Remember, we studied China when we were looking at Asia, and also India. So these countries are industrializing very, very quickly, and they're countries that are getting richer very, very quickly. Okay, so just to confirm, high income countries are rich ones, low income countries, poorer ones, countries with a low standard of living, and our newly emerging economies, countries that are kind of in the middle, are getting richer more quickly. Okay, so just make sure that if you need to, pause the video here and just get a little bit of a note down of those keywords, because they're going to be really important ones. Now, what we're going to do for the rest of the lesson is start to have a look at what makes a country a high or a low income country, trying to think about how we would be able to tell the difference between some of these countries. What I would like you to do in order to help you with this process is just have a look at the two pictures that we have at the bottom of your screen. So we've got picture A on the left and picture B on the right. So in order to get you thinking about what makes a high or a low income country, I simply want you to study these pictures, take a look at them. And I would then like you, please, to have a go at these reflection questions. Please could you write note or answers to these reflection questions in your red book. There is no need to write in full sentences. These are simply note form answers. The reason I'm asking you to do them is because it's just going to help your thinking about these different types of countries. So 3 questions for you. Which of these countries do you think is an LIC and which is an HIC? What are your reasons? What suggests to you that it's that kind of country? Secondly, was it easy to make a decision? And thirdly, what other information would you like to know about these places to help you make a decision? If you landed there, for example, if you were parachuted in, what else would you be looking for, or what would you want someone to tell you that would help you decide whether this is an HIC, an LIC, or even an NEE? So I'm going to suggest you pause the video there. You'll probably need about 5 to 10 minutes to answer those questions. Once you have studied the pictures, once you've got your questions ready, we can then start the video again, and we'll have a little bit of discussion about what I think we can see from these pictures. Okay, great. Welcome back. Hopefully you managed to spend some time studying those pictures and done your reflection questions. And I would imagine you found some of those questions a little bit difficult to do. And I've deliberately made it difficult by choosing pictures that I think are quite hard to tell whether it is an HIC or an LIC. I've done that deliberately. And the reason is that I want us to get away from just thinking, oh, LICs must be really, really poor countries and there's nothing good in them. It can be quite easy when we live in an HIC to look down at some countries that are a little bit less developed than we are. And it's really important to note that even in the poorest countries in the world, there are still pockets of wealth and lots of things about life there that we would recognise. So don't worry if you found it difficult to tell the difference between these pictures. That was absolutely the intention. So I'm just going to let you know which picture was which. So the first image A, was Lagos in Nigeria, which is an LIC. And the second picture B, is Seoul, which is in South Korea, which is an HIC. So well done if you managed to get that one. So A is our LIC and B is our HIC. How did you tell? If you got the answer, probably the thing that would have led me to that conclusion if I was looking at these pictures will be the quality of the buildings. For example, I can see some quite low-rise buildings in the left-hand corner of this picture of Nigeria, whereas it's much more uniformly high-rise in South Korea. I'm also looking at the amount of crowding that's in this city. But having said that, it is really, really hard to see just from this one snapshot. If we're going to make a decision, we really do need a lot more information. Some of the things that we might like to know about these places, I might want to know something about the people who actually live there. What's their life like? What level of income do they have? I might also want to know about the conditions or the facilities that are available in each of these places. And there are things that help us do this. In geography, we call these development indicators, and that's what we're going to have a look at next. So I did say there were going to be lots of keywords. I've got 3 more for you. If you want to write these down in your book, that would be a really good idea. Just pause the video if you need to make sure you can get them written down. So our first keyword, development indicators. So development indicators are statistics that help us judge the level of development within a country. In other words, they are statistics that help us judge, is this a rich or poor country? Is this a highly developed country, or is this a less developed country? These indicators or these statistics have to be specific. So they have to be very, very specific, and they also have to be measurable. What that's going to allow us to do is make comparison between countries. So development indicators are always going to give us a number. That might be a number in terms of currency. It could be a number in terms of dollars, so I can look at the wealth within a country and compare that. Or it might be the percentage of people who do something. But the key thing is they have to be measurable. That's what a development indicator is. It's a statistic, so we're going to get a number, so I can look at, okay, is this one higher or lower than others? And I can put countries in different orders according to their development indicators. We have 2 types of development indicators. We have economic and social indicators. These are words that we have looked at before, really, really important ones in geography. We're going to use them time and time again. So economic, remember, means anything to do with money or jobs. So economic development indicators are going to be ones to do with the amount of money people are making or the type of jobs that they're doing. We also have social development indicators. Remember, social means to do with people. So our social development indicators are going to be to do with people and how they live. Now, there are absolutely loads of different development indicators out there. Anything that tells us about the amount of development, wealth within the country that we can measure, that would count as a development indicator. So even the number of people with a mobile phone, the number of people reading newspapers, all of these are development indicators. However, there are some that are used a little bit more commonly than others, and I have listed some of them here for you. These are also on your Knowledge Organizer, which you have access to, and you probably already know that your Knowledge Organizers are also being sent to your homes, so that would be a good source of information for you. So I've included 5 here. Gross national product, which is measured in dollars. This means the total value of goods and services produced by a country. In other words, it's a measure of the wealth of the country. How much money does a country make? It is usually measured per capita. Per capita, capita means per person. Okay, the reason we measure it per person is to make it fairer. Because if you imagine there are lots of countries out there that have loads and loads of people, it wouldn't be fair to measure the amount they make with a much smaller country. So we take the value of the goods and services produced by the country, and then we divide it by the number of people. Unemployment rate, measured in a percentage, that means how many adults of working age do not have a job. The higher that number, the fewer people have jobs. If less people have jobs, that probably means they're making less money, and therefore the country isn't so rich. Adult literacy rate. This means the percentage of adults who are able to read and write. This is important because it tells us something about the level of education within a country. If our adult literacy rate is high, if lots of people can read and write, That suggests there is a good level of education, which tells us the government has enough money and as a stable government to be able to spend on those kind of things. But also, if there's good education and good literacy, that is going to mean that people are able to get better jobs and earn more money. Our fourth one is life expectancy. We have looked at life expectancy before. We've seen this statistic before when we were learning about population in China. Life expectancy means how long the average person lives for. Measured in years, and it gives us an indication of the health and the safety within a country. If you've got a high life expectancy, you're going to expect that to be a high income country or a developed country because that country has good quality healthcare, availability of medicines, but also people have clean water, enough food to eat, and it probably suggests to you it's a safe country, it's a stable country. And finally, at the bottom here, educational enrolment, which is also a percentage. The percentage of eligible children who are attending primary, secondary, or tertiary education. In other words, what percentage of children in the country actually go to school? If that is close to 100%, what that means is lots of children are going to school. They're not, for example, spending time in the fields or in factories working to earn money for their families. Once again, higher educational enrolment means that people are likely to have higher literacy rates and therefore get better jobs later on. So now there are some questions for you. So you have 3 tasks to do, and there is also an optional challenge. So once I've read through them, I'm going to suggest you take a pause again and then answer these questions in your red book. So the first one, sort the development indicators into 2 groups, social and economic indicators. Secondly, how would knowing the GNP of a country help us judge its development? If you knew the GNP, the gross national product of a country, what would that tell you about whether it's an HIC or an LIC? Why is that a useful statistic or a useful indicator for us to know? And question 3, how would life expectancy help us judge a country's development? What would that tell us about the country that might let us know whether it's an HIC or an LIC? Finally, remember this is an option if you finish. If you want a little bit more of a challenge, I want you to write in full sentences. Do you think social or economic indicators are a better way to judge development? If you could only have the social ones or the economic ones, which ones do you think would be most useful for you and why? So pause the video there. Remember, full sentence answers in your book, please, and then come and unpause and see me again when you have finished those questions. Good luck. Speak to you soon. Okay, hi everyone, welcome back. Hopefully you managed to do those tasks okay and now have a pretty good understanding about what we mean by development indicators. As you can see, they are really useful things to help us judge or draw conclusions about the level of development within a country. However, they are not without their problems. What we're going to look at next is some of the problems that we might find around using development indicators and have a think about if there is a better way to use these indicators to get a more accurate impression of what development is like within a country. So, I'm going to show you a series of different sets of statistics, different sets of development indicators. What I want you to do, and you feel free to pause me if you need to, take a look at each of these statistics and let me know which country do you think is the more developed one. Is it country A or country B? Don't need to write that down, just make a little bit of a judgment for each one. So starting off, country A on the left and country B on the right. So I think this one's fairly straightforward. I hope that you all came to the conclusion that country A is the more developed country. There's 4 pieces of evidence that helps me draw that conclusion. Firstly, the gross national income, that is just another way of expressing the GNP, or the gross national product, an indication of the wealth of the country. The wealth is much higher, 39,000 in A compared to only 1,455 in country B. The life expectancy in country A is much higher. It's 81.2 years, whereas the average person in country B can only be expected to live 57.6 years. In country A, the average child goes to school for 17.4 years compared to only 5 years in country B. So the level of education, the amount of education children are receiving is much better, much higher in country A. And finally, in country A, there is 100% of people have access to clean water, whereas in country B, it's only 41%. That's going to tell us something about the facilities in the country. It's also going to tell us something about the healthcare in the country as well. And quite probably the fact that only 41% have access to clean water tells you quite a lot about why people only live on average to 57 years. So very well done if you said country A. And one of the things we want to do as geographers is try to really use those statistics to back up our answers. And so just to let you know, country A is the UK, that is where we live. Country B is South Sudan, which is one of the newest countries in the world, in fact the newest country in Africa. Was only formed just a few years ago, but as you can see, is one of our poorest countries. So UK would be an HIC, South Sudan would be an LIC. So it's a fairly straightforward one to start you off. Let's have a look at another example. So this time we have country A on the left, country B on the right. Gross national income for A, $1,665. Country B, over $15,000. Country A, people are expected to live to 63.7 years. In country B, 73.9. 9.5 years of expected schooling. In A, 14.1 in country B, and 65% of people have access to clean water in A, whereas it is 97% in B. So which is the most developed? Okay. Hopefully you have all said country A. Remember, those really good geographers, really hardworking students amongst you will also be thinking about, can I back that up? What are the statistics, or what are the numbers I can put in to support my conclusion? So instead of saying country A is more developed because country B is more developed because people live longer, I'm going to say country B is more developed because people live longer. For example, the life expectancy is 73.9 years compared to only 63.7 years. So, which of these countries? Country A is Haiti. Country B is the Dominican Republic. Both of these countries are in the Caribbean, or in the continent of North America that we looked at a couple of half terms ago. The reason I've picked these two is because you will notice here that they are right next to each other. So really interesting example. Country B, the Dominican Republic, is on the right of this island of Hispaniola, and country B, Haiti, is on the left. So even though they are right next to each other and share the same island, which is a really tiny island actually, they have hugely different levels of development. So interesting for us to think about why that might be. Okay, final example, country A and country B. Just going to give you a few seconds. I'm not going to read through the statistics with you this time because you know how to do those now. Okay, so a slightly trickier one. Why do I say this is a tricky one? Well, I think the evidence can point us in one of two directions. So, if you think that the gross national income, just the amount of money in a country, is the most important thing, then clearly we're going to think that country A is the more developed. It's got GNI per capita of $16,127 compared to only $14,790 in B. So if we're just going to look at the gross national income, just the economic indicator, we're clearly going to think that country A is the more developed. However, if we have a look at the other statistics, the social development indicators, we might be led in another direction. For example, the life expectancy in B is 80.1 years compared to only 76.7 in A. So this shows us the exact reason why it's really difficult to just use one development indicator on its own. If we used just one development indicator, we might have ended up with a different impression about whether we thought China or Costa Rica was more developed. It's unfair because if we only use one development indicator on its own, that tells us something about one small, tiny aspect of a country. It doesn't tell us much about the whole country, and it doesn't tell us everything we need to know about what it's like to live in that country. So there are some real limitations or problems by just using one development indicator on its own, and particularly one economic indicator, because economic indicators tell us something about the money. They don't tell us what that money is being used for and whether it's being used to improve the lives of people within a country. Now, geographers have recognised this problem and they have come up with something to help with that problem. And what this is a new development indicator, a relatively new development indicator. It was developed in 1990 by the United Nations. And their new development indicator they use is called the Human Development Index. And this is now the most common way to judge the level of development within a country. What they were trying to do here is to overcome the exact problem we looked at on the last slide. The fact that just using one indicator on its own doesn't give us a very accurate impression of development. So what their new development indicator does is it combines development indicators. It combines indicators to give a score between 0 and 1. The higher the number, the closer to 1 the number is, the more developed a country is. There are 3 indicators that are used. GNP per capita, so it takes into account the wealth of the country. It is a rich or a poor country. It uses life expectancy, which tells us quite a lot about the healthcare in a country, also the access to clean water, the availability of food, and also educational enrollment, how good the education is in the country. So they take these 3 statistics, they put them through a clever algorithm or calculation, and that then gives us a number between 0 and 1. The higher the number, the closer the number is to 1, the more developed a country is. If you have a look at this map over on the right-hand side of the page, you will see it shows the Human Development Index, or the HDI, of all of the different countries around the world. My darkest green colours have a figure of 0.9 or over, so are really high numbers, closer to 1, therefore more developed. And then we go down green through yellow, through orange, and down to red, and this dark red colour, which is our lowest HDI scores, between 0.35 and 0.399 and under. So our lowest scores are over here in this red colour. What I want you to do now is simply take a look, pause me in just a moment, and take a look at these 3 reflection questions. Once again, note form answer in your book. Which parts of the world have the highest HDI? Make sure you use that key figure out which colours you're looking at for the highest HDI. What do you notice about the HDI of Africa? The continent is Africa, is over here. Are there any variations or differences across the continent of Africa? Is it the same everywhere? Are there any patterns you can see? For example, in the north or the south, the east or west of the country, towards the coast, towards the middle? What differences can you see in the level of HDI across the continent of Africa? So pause there, note form answers in your book, and then join me when you're done. Okay, now that's done, answer time. So which parts of the world have the highest HDI? Well, hopefully you will recognise the highest HDI has this green colour here, this dark green. So the highest HDI, we've got the continent of North America, the USA, Canada. We've also got much of Europe, particularly Northern Europe. We are just here. And we have some parts of Asia, specifically Japan and South Korea over here. And down the bottom in this southeastern corner, we have Australia and New Zealand. So the HDI is highest in our HICs, our high income countries. Secondly, what do you notice about the HDI of Africa? Well, in general, it's pretty low. We've got some countries with 0.7 to 0.749, then it goes all the way down, and we can see that all of our countries that have the lowest HDI, least developed countries, are in Africa. However, it's also really, really important to note that there are differences or variations across the continent. It's absolutely not fair to say that in Africa, all of the countries have the same level of development, all of them are LICs. In fact, what you can see towards the north of the country, or of the continent rather, you've got some quite high levels of HDI. These are countries like Algeria up there, and also in South Africa, right down the bottom. The highest levels of poverty, or lowest HDI levels, are in this band here, what we call sub-Saharan Africa, or the Sahel region. And these are countries that are on the edge of the Sahara Desert, and that's one of the reasons why they found it so difficult to develop. But we will have a look at that in more detail later on. But what I really want you to take away from this is an understanding that yes, levels of development across the continent of Africa are lower than in many parts of the world, but there are big variations. It's not the same level of development everywhere. And then remembering the pictures we looked at towards the start of this lesson, even within these countries that are LICs, there are still pockets of wealth, and there's a huge amount of variation even within the countries. For example, the picture A that we looked at the beginning was in Nigeria and Lagos, which is just here, which we can see looks like it's got quite a low HDI, between 0.5 and 0.549. However, as we saw from that picture, that city of Lagos looked really like it was very wealthy, and it was quite hard for us to tell whether it was an HIC or an LIC. Okay, so what I would now like you to do, that's the end of our lesson. I now want you to go back into section 2 of your Google form, and there are 6 questions there that I would like you to answer. Don't forget that if you need any help, you can always rewind this video and listen to bits. You can also use the notes that you have in your exercise book, your red exercise book, and you can also look at your knowledge organizer if you need to. So just make sure that you check your understanding and then fill in all of the questions to the best of your ability when you get the chance. Please do email me if you need any help, and I will try and get back to you as quickly as I can. Bye for now.